That loser didn't stand a chance! I mean, look at me!
Predator gameplay, as Rocksteady calls it, is how Batman deals with armed opponents. He doesn't use guns, and a head-on approach won't work, but you aren't really at a disadvantage. The big difference between most traditional stealth games and Batman is that normally, traditional stealth games task you with moving through an area undetected, dealing with enemies only when necessary. But in Batman, your goal is to KO every thug in the room. Detective vision lets you see through walls to get a sense of the entire layout, the enemy patrols, and environmental opportunities like walls. All from the vantage points of gargoyles. Detective mode and gargoyles together form the foundation of the stealth gameplay. They give you an incredible advantage, and in fact without them, some maps might be frustrating. The section in the gardens is a giant bowl with 3 floors and gargoyles all around. Thugs have a line of sight from nearly anywhere, unlike every other map in the game. I think this is why it's the only one to not be a challenge map, since it would require an extreme version where the vantage points are booby-trapped. Leading guards to where you want can only be done by being seen, blowing up a wall, using sonic batarangs, or setting off a suicide collar. Batarangs can make thugs look in the direction they came from, or knock them down. The Bat Claw and the Lion Launcher can pull or push thugs off ledges respectively. Stealth itself is introduced gradually. First you get taught the glide kick on Zaz, then silent takedowns on the first armed thugs. Both times you have to move around them first, using gargoyles, setting up the basic principle. Plus they're already facing away and spread out. The very first stealth section is also laid out nicely to quickly get them. One guy is in front of your vent, facing away. And the second is close by, also facing away, set up for a ledge takedown. If you do that, the third is pretty far away, safely teaching you those are loud and attract attention. And without most gadgets, this first one is about basic takedowns and positioning. I believe this is why you come back here later with nearly all the gadgets you'll get, plus the gargoyles are now rigged. The first guy this time around is facing toward you until he finishes his patrol, making you choose to wait or draw attention to yourself. The Line Launcher is a good alternative to getting around without gargoyles. The Bat Claw is put to good use here with all the walkways. This area is filled with nooks and crannies and places to hide, so I see why it was the only one to have gargoyles booby-trapped in story mode. Thugs become more erratic and afraid as each one gets taken out, and I doubt Joker helps.
So you can hear me. I want you to hurt these guys. They're nothing to me.
This erratic behavior only helps you if they split up, but they pair off sometimes. You do have tools for that, such as the multi-batarang. The sonic batarang can lure them out one at a time, but it has a long cooldown, and you can KO with a detonation upgrade, but it prevents you from using them again. Most things that KO thugs can't be used from vantage points. You can throw all types of batarangs, and detonate gel and sonic batarangs from vantage points, but laying gel and using the claw and line launcher all require you to have your boots on the ground. There's an inverted takedown from vantage points, but it's loud and they check that gargoyle after that. This makes you put yourself at risk to complete the goal, KOing everybody. When suicide collars are introduced, you now have a limited time before thugs are alerted to your presence after the first KO, and drawn to that location after each subsequent one. I think this was done because after all the gadgets you have by the end of the game, it would be easy to ghost your way through the enemies, since they are very predictable when they are all accounted for. When you really think about it, Predator is actually stealthy combat. It's just combat against armed opponents. What I find interesting about this is that Rocksteady managed to make stealth geared towards empowerment, which usually runs counter to it, and make it challenging and fun. If you don't have to avoid enemies, why would you? Batman simply not using guns provides a reason to sneak, but you still have the advantage of all your tools, vantage points, mobility, and detective vision. Despite outnumbering and outgunning you, they are the prey. Most superheroes beat people up in fistfights, so combat isn't unique to Batman. But that's why Predator works so well. This is what it feels like to be Batman.
I really like the idea of challenges, but the major problem I have is with the way Predator medals work, especially in comparison with combat medals. In combat, medals are based on score, the same scoring system used in the story mode. It's based on max combo and variance, with bonuses for things like not getting hit the entire challenge or completing a wave in a single combo. Predator medals are 3 specific tasks you have to complete all in one go if you want 3 medals. Most are simple and can be done in any challenge, like performing a silent or inverted takedown, but only count as a medal on a specific challenge. The few that can only be done on a particular map would be the main reason for using the medal system as is, and another would be to give players reason to attempt these challenges, since they would have done them in story mode already, this time trying things they may not have thought of before. The extreme challenges are the only ones with medals like that, though. My issue is that in extreme Predator challenges, the difficulty mostly comes from getting thugs to be where you want them to be, which is somewhat random and frustrating once they know you're there, and they will shortly after taking down the first thug. Since every player is trying to do the same things, I imagine top players' optimal strategies end up being similar, as opposed to combat challenges, which give you the freedom to experiment. Then again, I wouldn't be surprised if top-level combat play also ended up similar, since all moves have different point values, which means there could be a maximum possible score, based on doing certain moves as much as possible after getting maximum variation. But at least just trying to get all the medals is doable your own way. In Predator, you have to do all 3 of those specific things or the attempt is a wash. If you lose your opportunities to do just one of the medals, restarting is the best thing you can do, as continuing just wastes time, at least if you're an achievement whore like I was. In combat challenges, if you do poorly early on, you can often earn 3 medals anyway, because the later waves have the most score potential by far, so sticking it out is worth it. If, however, a gel explosion KOs 1 more or 1 less thug than you intended, or if a thug simply walks one way instead of another, that can be the difference between getting a medal and not getting one at all, or not getting it quickly, which is important because the leaderboards rank you on time. Predator challenges aren't conducive to improvising if your plans fall through, or doing things your own way. I was thinking that had Predator maps used a score system with map-specific bonuses scored properly to help reach 3 medals but be possible without them, Rocksteady could still show players cool moves they may not have known they could do, players could still attempt them, but it would also be possible to complete stealth challenges as you see fit while getting 3 medals. However, thinking about it further, it would be very hard to balance such a scoring system while also accounting for time in the score. And for all I know, Rocksteady tried something like that during development and decided against it. I suppose this is more subjective, but I just think that if a challenge pushes you to restart it rather than finish it, it can be improved. I really do enjoy both stealth and combat challenges in general, and it was a great idea to use the strongest facets of the game as a reward for playing extensively, but I find Predator too restrictive at times on extreme maps. If Batman is the world's greatest detective, then Rocksteady needed to make the player feel like a great detective. The segments are simple and formulaic. Batman needs to find someone to advance the plot, so he investigates the location they were at to find a forensic trail leading to them, and follows it. The first one is a good example of what they could have been. Oracle and Batman laid out pretty clearly what the objective is.
So what's the plan? Isolate something in that room unique to Bowles?
Exactly.
The only scannable item in the room is Bowles' flask. But during the intro, Bowles carries his flask on the left side of his belt, closest to the player. He takes a swig out of it in the very next cutscene, and his character bio, which pops up when you have to go find him, tells you he's an alcoholic. So when the flask is the only thing you can examine, it seems to me to be a wasted opportunity. The thing is, I didn't notice all these details, except the bio, until later playthroughs, so I'm certainly not on any high horse here. I also understand that the goal is to make as many players as possible feel like Batman solving a crime, so I don't expect some mindbender requiring players to be the world's greatest detective. But even just a few changes could have made it more engaging than just holding a button down looking at the only object that lets you do it. After scanning the flask, Batman toggles through a few different scan modes: fingerprints, DNA, nicotine, and, bad breath. Maybe give players manual control over the modes in the search phase, and have a few dead-end objects to scan in each mode to give the player more to do and think through. When searching for Dr. Young, you find her via her fingerprints, highlighted with this security feed of her touching the safe, and Batman narrows it down to fresh ones for you. Again, having a few more scannable objects would make players figure out they have to find her fingerprints. could also make players narrow it down to fresh prints themselves. During the search for the warden, his blood on the cane is shown in a cutscene, and again, it didn't need to be that simple. Gordon's pipe isn't mentioned until you scan it, and that's what made me realize I didn't need to know anything about the pipe because it was the only thing I could scan. Lastly, they could have had 1 or 2 more ways of finding someone other than following forensic breadcrumbs. It boils down to the plot needing Batman to be somewhere, so perhaps you could have hacked something to find access logs to find where someone went, or went over security feeds to find them. Something. Look, I realize it was their first Batman game, and I will acknowledge designing puzzles must be difficult. But I don't think it had to be as repetitive as it is. To give credit where it's due, I enjoyed every detective part on a first playthrough. But several playthroughs later, it became apparent how repetitive it is. This is probably the most underdeveloped pillar of Asylum's gameplay.
Anyone seen the big bad bat? I warn you, he may look like an idiot and talk like an idiot, but don't let that fool you. He really is an idiot.